So slowly but surely we are plowing through our boxes up here. As you can see, we've taken down several, and you're starting to get a little bit of a hint of what is behind those boxes. There is something behind there, but we had the boxes up and wanted to just reveal that slowly. We took off the boxes of race, we've taken off the boxes of gender, we've taken off the boxes that had the words you on them for whatever boxes that you are in. And that is symbolic for us as we go through this sermon series about how we're trying to erase these boxes, how we're trying to get out of them so that the only box that really matters in this world is the box called child of God. That we all would be standing in the same box and we wouldn't be worried if we were going to take this person and move them into that box. So this week we're going to work on the box of social class. When I was growing up and I was telling the children that story about the Coca-Cola, that is true. I drank Coke and people drank Pepsi and they thought I was weird. Because for some reason in my little western Illinois town, people thought we were from the South. And you're supposed to drink Pepsi, in southern Illinois. Well, I didn't ever get that. And I always did feel a little different because I was always drinking Coca-Cola when everybody else was drinking Pepsi. And it's so bad that when I start to go west a little bit, even out to like DeKalb or somewhere, and I'm at a restaurant and they ask me what I want to drink, and I will say, can I have a Coke? And they'll say, is Pepsi okay? You know that television commercial? No, it is not okay. I don't care what Steve Carell says. No, if it's not Coke, it's not good enough, right? But we do have these little things that separate us. And we begin to walk in what I learned very early in my collegiate career. We walk in this place that's called class warfare. And the problem is that I guess we don't really know that we're in a class warfare. I want to tell you, I have a video for you, but I have a little story I want to tell you about a teacher that I had. He was my world religions teacher. And I thought he was a fantastic teacher. But I didn't know the very first day whether or not we were going to get along. Because when he walked into class, the first thing he did was, there was a big old pile of Bibles sitting on the table, and he picked up one of the Bibles, and he flung it against the wall. And he said to the class, if you think that book is more important than any other book, you need to get out of my class right now. There was a fundamentalist man that was sitting in the front row who didn't take that very well. And he kind of fought with Dr. McTee the rest of the semester about that. But what really impressed me that day, that first meeting of this professor of world religions, is that he stood in front of us and he said, my name is Dr. McTee and I'm going to teach you world religions and blah, 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 blah. I've studied Southeastern religions and I've studied in Sri Lanka and I've studied with Buddhist masters and la, 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 la. And he's going on with all these credentials, which made him really fascinating because he has all these credentials. And then he said, but let me tell you how I got here. And he stood there just like this for about 5-10 seconds. And he said, he's talking just like me. But after this 5 or 10 seconds, he takes his finger down and he says, I grew up in the panhandle of Florida. And I grew up as a Southern Baptist gentleman in the panhandle of Florida. And he just starts talking with this very deep, articulated Southern accent. And I grew up and I went all through Southern Baptist schools. And I went to a Southern Baptist college. And I went to a Southern Baptist graduate school. And then he said, but do you know what I found out? Them Southern Baptists don't write contracts very well. And he went on to tell us this story about how, as this young man who wanted to study religion, but he was in the Southern Baptist church, he was being told he had to study Christianity only. And so as he went through college and as he went through his first level of graduate school for his master's degree, he was studying Southeastern Christianity because of the fact that his scholarships were based upon studying Southeastern Christianity. And so he found a loophole when it came PhD time, that the contract for his scholarship actually said Southeastern religion, not Southeastern Christianity. And he fought with them. And he told the hierarchy, I want to study Southeastern Buddhism. And they said, you can't because you are a Southern Baptist and you are going to do it our way. And he said, no, you are the ones who made the mistake. I want to study Southeastern Buddhism. So they had to let him because he found the loophole that they couldn't get out of. And when he got out of the country and he studied Southeastern Buddhism in Sri Lanka, he began to understand what class was. And so as he tells us this whole story, he then goes back to speaking as if he's lived in Chicago his entire life. And he says, you see, if I had come in here and I had spoken with the accent I grew up with, you all would think that I did not have the credentials to teach you this class. Because the thing I learned was that when my voice had a twang in it, I was seen as uneducated. I have more education than any of you will ever want, is what he said to us. He says, but if I taught you with my Southern accent, that I have had to overcome so that academia will see me as worthy, you would not want to be in my class. I didn't care. I really didn't care, but I do know that there were folks in the class who really would have cared. Because, you see, we have in our lives grown up somehow classist, believing that someone with a Southern accent is a little bit less intelligent than the rest of us. Now, I'm going to tell you why. Because, as I said, I grew up someplace that thought it was the South. It's 4 hours from here on the Mississippi River. But they thought they were the South, so I grew up and I said things like, it doesn't look good. Do you all know what that means? It doesn't look good. Or I would say things like, are we going to go out of an evening? Evening, no G there, of an evening. Or instead of, are we going to go out in the evening? And when I was in the ministry and here in Chicago going through seminary, I had a seminary professor pull me aside and say, you need to change your language. Why? Because you don't appear when you speak as smart as you are. I had a seminary professor tell me that because I was dropping my G's. And I was saying things like wasn't and doesn't and isn't it? Isn't it? Isn't it funny? I will say to Steve still today, isn't this weird? Isn't it weird? I'll say instead of isn't it? And this seminary professor took me aside and said, you appear to be, when you speak, less intelligent than you actually are. That's a class warfare that we are in, and we don't even realize that we're in that class warfare. So when I started to research this week, I found kind of a funny little video. I had Steve cut it down to about half. We're going to watch it from the halfway point, but what I want to tell you is that what you're not going to see is horrific. Because one of the things that they did was they had a young girl stand and look at her classmates walking by her, and she identified all of them. Oh, that one's ghetto. Oh, those are the dorks. Oh, yeah, that guy's preppy. And this girl, this young girl in high school age, was in the midst of this class warfare that she didn't even know she was in the midst of. But watch this part, because it's a little bit funnier, and I think you'll like it a little bit better.
I'm rich now. Pay attention to me.
Anybody have those plastic seat covers for their couches when they were growing up? My mother did. My mother had those plastic seat covers. The most poignant one to me here in that whole video was the couple saying, well, we have a 60-inch television. Because growing up, I used to think that the bigger the things that you had mean that you made it, right? You got a big TV, you got a big car, you got a big house, you got a big bank account, you made it. And that's what we strive for in our world, is to be in that class that is different than we are. But here's the thing, we never want to go backward to the class that is below us, right? In the United States of America, sociologists would tell you there are 3 classes. They would tell you that there are 2 classes. They would tell you there are 5 classes. They would tell you there are 6 classes. But here's the thing. Most of us in our minds think that there are 2 classes, rich and not rich. And when we want to move up, we want to be rich, and we don't want to be not rich. And there's an awful lot of people in between there. But the point of this video that I showed it to you is that while there is a lot of class warfare that's going on between those who have this amount of money and those who have this amount of money, there's an awful lot of ways that we divide one another by class that has nothing to do with money. So for example, the young African-American men that were in the video, and the one said, my dad said he'd support me no matter what as long as it was legal. And we chuckle about that, and one of the reasons why we chuckle about that is because don't we deep down inside of ourselves have this idea that black people are thugs? I just saw somebody use that word about Black Lives Matters on Facebook probably a month ago. Somebody was responding to a Black Lives Matter post about how all of these people are thugs. That's a class statement right there. Because, of course, thugs are below the mafia, because the mafia hires the thugs, right? We've grown into understanding that in our brains without ever realizing that it's in there. Think about the lady who said, well, what about, I could just look at somebody in a bathing suit on the beach and know that they didn't belong. And the guy next to her went, didn't belong? Those are harsh words. But don't we sometimes find ourselves in those positions where we're thinking, that person is odd and I don't want to be around them. They don't belong here. They don't belong in the midst of us. They don't need to come in here. That's kind of what's happening in that scripture, that real scripture that Sue read for me today, that the one that I really wanted, that I made the mistake in the bulletin on, is that the Pharisees are saying to Jesus, why are you sitting with these sinners? Why are you with these dregs of society that don't belong with us? If you're going to be a teacher, you're going to be a rabbi, you're going to be walking around here doing things, those kinds of people don't belong with us, especially those dreaded tax collectors. Those tax collectors are people that we put in all kinds of different classes. Think of how you feel when you get a letter in the mail from the IRS. What kind of class do you have them in at that point, right? Same thing was happening in the scriptures. People hated the tax collectors because they were wealthy. And as one researcher wrote in a paper that I read yesterday, the tax collectors could create a tax for Rome for anything that they wanted. They taxed you just for being. They taxed you for walking your animal on a Roman road. They taxed you for what you needed to pay for your property. The tax collectors were people that were hated. And so here's the Pharisees. And they're saying to Jesus, why are you with that class of people? Why are you with those sinners? And ask the disciples, why does your master eat with all of these lowlifes and sinners? You see, what the church has done over the years, what the church has become really good at, is only developing two classes, saved and sinners. And if you are a sinner, you're not saved. And if you are saved, you better not be a sinner. If you want to be in, you better profess Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior and stay that way. Because if you don't, you're a sinner, and that means you are out. We live our lives with this idea that there is always somebody that's going to be out from us because we're trying as hard as we possibly can to stay right in the class that we are or move up into the class where we want to be. What I teach my disciple class is this, is that the reason why class warfare happens, especially in the United States, is because in the United States of America, the upper crust has developed and fine-tuned getting the middle to oppress the bottom. If you don't know that, let me say that to you again. The upper crust has refined, fine-tuned getting the middle to oppress the bottom. Because what the middle never wants to do is go down. What the upper crust never wants to do is go down in class. But because the money is here at the top 10%, I know we like to talk about the 1%, but 9.9% of other people in that top 10% have more money than the other 90% below them. The top uses the middle to oppress the bottom. That's where we get ourselves into real struggle of class warfare. That's where we become the Pharisees who say, those people are not going to be with us. We place ourselves in that Pharisaic position and we pronounce judgment and say, those people, and we keep using that term, those people need to stay where they are. Do you know that if you have been to Disney World more than once in your life, you are considered to be upper middle class? Do you know that? I don't consider myself upper middle class. I've been to Disney World 25 times. You know why? Because going to Disney World was always a dream of mine when I was a little girl who had nothing. I wanted to go there. I wanted to be there. And once I got there, I'm like, oh, look at all the bells and whistles. And the bells and whistles are fun. And the bells and whistles are given freely to those who can afford it. But those of us who can't afford it, those of us who are in the lower social classes, we strive for it as much as we possibly can. And there's always some Pharisee. There's always a Pharisee somewhere telling us, you don't get out of your class. You don't belong. One of the things that I really liked about this video was they used the word tribe. Because what do you do when you're in a tribe? You defend your tribe, right? You defend your tribe. Your tribe is your people. You hear it today called, these are my peeps. That's your tribe. These are the people that I want to be with. The United States of America is breaking down into a tribal society again. And if you're not in the right tribe, you are not going to make it. If you're in the wrong tribe of people, you are going to slowly but surely be phased out of what's happening here. And what all of us are doing, whether we realize it or not, what all of us are doing is we're desperately trying to get into another tribe and ask people to accept us to be in that tribe so that we will survive. That's what the Pharisees did not want the sinners of their time to do, survive. Get rid of all those people and we don't have to worry about them. That's still happening today. Get rid of those folks. Put them in that box and ship it somewhere else. We don't need them. They don't belong. Those people that live south of the Mason-Dixon line, well, they're not too bright anyway. We convince ourselves of that. And so they vote a way that we don't want to vote. People in the south, all those people up there are elitists. They're the elites. We don't want to be with them. Then we say, well, all those people out there in California, they're weird. We don't want to be with them. Then we say, all those Yankees up there in Maine, we don't want to be with them. They're weird. And all of a sudden, all we've done is staked out this little tiny place where we can be. Because we think that that's the place that we have to hold on to. But the problem with that is that while we're holding on to our place, we're making sure that other people aren't getting into it. We're keeping other people in their place. If you've ever grown up with anybody in your life saying to you, know your place, then you are living in the midst of class warfare. If you've ever grown up with someone saying to you, you are out of your place, get back in your place, then you're living in the midst of class warfare. If you've ever said to anyone, know your place and stay there, you're living in class warfare. So our job as Christian people is to try and break down that wall, that box of class warfare that is all around us, like Jesus did, and eat and drink, talk with, work with, have conversations with those who are different from us. Those who might not sound as intelligent as they are because they have a little bit of accent, or those who might sound a little bit more elitist than they are because they have a different kind of accent. To welcome in those who others reject. To be with those who people say are not good enough or that they don't belong. You see, our job is to take each and every one of these boxes of class that we put people in and tear the box apart and throw it away and say, your only class is the class of Jesus Christ. Your class is the class that Jesus created for us, child of God. But to do that, we have to be willing to let other people into our tribe. We have to be able to let people be with us, and we have to be able to ask people if we can be with them. It's not all about what we want sometimes. It's about what others need from us. So as we go through this Lent, I want you to think about that. As I told the children, think about those places where you don't even really think about something going on until you see someone alone. Is there someone whose class doesn't match with yours? That perhaps maybe you need to take the wall down between you and them and invite them into your life, or let them invite you into theirs. Amen.